Something about today's topic on spiritual friendship circles attracted you here. So it's a hope that you will get a taste of that with the people that are here. Take this with you so you can build on that in your own communities, in your own homes, in your own places of worship. I'll tell you more about Still Point later, but I want to start quickly by introducing our speaker, Anne Jaqua. I'll read her official, and then I'll tell you a little about her. Anne is a spiritual director and a co-founder of Still Point, the Center for Christian Spirituality. She has been a retreat leader and a mentor to many people, including candidates for ministry in the Diocese of Los Angeles. She was on staff at Trinity Episcopal Church for a long time as coordinator of shared ministry in Santa Barbara. In another life, she was a biologist and worked with Sojourners community in Washington, D.C. to address ecological and social justice issues as a retreat leader and spiritual director. Just a little about Anne. It was at her wedding that the dream of Still Point started. And a group of people got together and wondering how to go deeper in their own spiritual lives, and they sat and drank together and came out with what is now Still Point 30 years later. And Anne has been a mentor to so many of us. How many of you have sat at her feet before? Yeah. And she continues that legacy today. So I invite you to join me in welcoming Anne Jaqua.
Thank you, Ravi. Well, I should add that we have to give the LA Times credit because they had written a series of articles about the liberal churches. And it was pretty damning because we had all left spirituality aside, according to these articles, and we were no longer talking about experiences. We were talking about action, etc. Well, that had been going on for a number of weeks, and those of us at my wedding reception began talking about it, and we looked at it. We were standing in a small group, and it was an ecumenical small group, and a very ecumenical small group, and we were saying, oh, the church needs to do something. Well, you know what happens when you say that. And so that's what happened. And so we began by reclaiming spiritual practices that had been left aside, each out of our own faith tradition. And that was a pretty fascinating year of listening to each other and focusing on a practice that we had not even perhaps done ourselves. But we learned ourselves and then taught each other, and then were brave enough to put it out to say, if the churches in general in our area would like to have us come, we would do that. Well, that was a huge step for us, you know. But we did, and it was a fascinating journey, and it led to spiritual direction training, and now to this. So in that process, we have really become very, very interested in having this be more of a communal situation, and that's why we're doing this now. What I would like now, before we pray, is to have you turn to the people nearest you and just introduce yourselves. We're a little too big to go around the room, but it'd be nice for you to know who's here. And if you need to move around, that's okay. I'll call you back. right, before you become too excited about your neighbors, let's come back. And if you look in your folder, you'll find the opening prayer on a piece of blue paper. And we're all going to read this together. I'd like us to read it slowly, stopping at the end of each line briefly. A little bit like chanting the psalms, I guess. Gracious God, in your name we gather. You are here in our midst. In the presence of your Spirit, we become your body. To listen, to share, to learn, to care, and to pray for one another. Move within us, move among us, Spirit of compassion. Bind us to one another and to the world outside this room. We offer our presence and our work here today to the healing of our world. Amen. First, I'd like to talk about what this practice is and what it isn't. So we start with what it is. And there are many ways to describe this, because when you're trying to describe a mystery, it takes a lot of words to figure that out. But I would say that it's a contemplative practice. It's grounded in mystery, and it's steeped in silence. And it includes intercessory prayer, which means that we spend a lot of time in between things going inside in silence into our heart. And then we speak from that point. And it's a practice that most of us are not used to. It takes a lot of time to make it feel as if this is the way everything is done, because of course it isn't. We've all been in meetings where there's no space in between anything. And so this is a practice that we hope can influence many other areas in our life, whether it's a parish council meeting or a political meeting or whatever meeting that we might begin to wish for and perhaps ask for silence so that we can go inside. So it's contemplative. The mystery is that something comes to us from inside that we didn't expect or know beforehand. That's the real mystery here. We can give it many names. We can say it's the Spirit of God moving us. Many names for God. And then the intercessory prayer part comes out of that, which is very different. It's not as if we think we know what to tell God, to ask for. It's intercessory in a new way. And for me it certainly was, and you'll see how this works as we go along. So it's a different practice from our usual sitting together in small groups, where we often listen to each other for the sake of the other, certainly, but in order to fix something, or to change something, or to get our point across. This is not that. And that's kind of a relief in a lot of ways, because while you're listening, you don't have to be trying to figure out what you're going to say, because you don't know yet. You haven't gone inside to find out what you're going to say, if anything. And another round of silence is perfectly fine. So it relaxes us to move in to the Spirit inside ourselves. So it's not a place where we have crosstalk or correct people or add to or say, oh yes, and I understand that's my experience too. No. We just pay attention, we listen. There's a wonderful quote from The Art of Spiritual Guidance by Carolyn Grattan, and I'll read it to you. The aim of spiritual guidance becomes that of helping persons get the various parts of their life in tune with the larger mystery as it flows through the whole. To get in touch with the larger mystery, below perhaps the fragmented parts of our life. There's a wonderful Sufi story that I love about the fish in the sea. The fish swimming around in search of the water, as we are in search of God, swimming around in God, searching for God, day after day, week after week. So this gives us a chance, and it's lovely that you've come today, because I'm hoping that what you experience is a practice that will help us get in touch with that deeper flow of mystery that we're in all the time and don't have time to recognize or to find. And the wonderful thing is we carry it around with us everywhere, but we don't pay attention to it. So this will be a fascinating thing if you can get just even a sense of that today. There's so many ways of describing this larger mystery, and I invite you to not be limited in your own description for yourself of this mystery, because mystery is big, includes a lot. But here are some various names from various traditions. The Tao, the mystery of all that is, being itself, the divine will, the intimate presence of the holy other, the flow of created and uncreated energies, the abyss of nothingness, the holy otherness of God. And there are so many more names, so many more descriptive words for this mystery. So do not be limited to any other list, because they also change in my experience. The book that we had here by Rosemary Dougherty, about group spiritual direction, and this really identifies the fact that friendship circles began as group spiritual direction. That's what we called it early on. But that seemed limiting to a lot of people and a little off-putting, because spiritual direction, the term itself, is a little confusing, because we don't give direction to anybody. We don't get direction, clearly. So it's a misnomer in a lot of ways. But her book is called Group Spiritual Direction, Community for Discernment, which unpacks it a bit more. And in that book, she says this is two or more people gathered in the power of love and for the sake of love. Two or more people gathered to pay attention to love, to the prayer of God unfolding in the heart of the person seeking God. So that helps us a bit more, doesn't it, to see that we can get in touch with the love of God inside ourselves. And that's what we're hoping to do today. We make a lot of assumptions in order to do this, so I'm going to confess mine. You probably have your own assumptions about God and any practice. But my assumptions are these. God is always engaged with us, always. And that we have within our heart the inviting, challenging, purposeful love of God. It's in there. God is always there loving us to become who we are. Lovers at home in love. We are God's dream for the world. It manifests in passion for truth, justice, reverence for beauty, in response to God's dream for us. Those are my assumptions. You probably began thinking of your own as I was saying that. And so this is really a ministry that we can create for ourselves and others among us, really wherever we are, that really is about listening and being heard at its base, knowing that we're listening with the love of God in mind, both from what we're hearing and where we're hearing it in ourselves. It has a very clear intentionality, and it can become a way of life for us to actually hear, listen and hear, more than just hear, but actually take in what we're hearing to a place of love inside. So that's a kind of, you're going to hear so many descriptions of this as we go along, and we'll have chance to practice so you'll get some sense of it. In some ways, it's an act of obedience to God, that we're able to, and this is a quote, to hear each other into speech. We know that we're not heard very often, especially in this culture now. Maybe it's always been that way, but now we know it's very hard to actually be heard. We have to, ask. We have to get somebody to really pay attention. I have to get my grandsons to turn off their cell phones. We're all immersed in lots of distractions. So to be heard is a great gift and a healing gift. It's also an act of hospitality for the other person, an act of focus, and an act of soul inquiry. We know how unusual it is in our own experience, because when we are heard, we know it. We realize this is different. That person really saw me, heard me at a deep level, and so that's what we're hoping to practice. Now we know we can't do it all the time. One of my past lives involved 7 years as a hospice person doing education and volunteer training to be with people who were dying. And the idea that we would be able to do anything at the end of life for a person was really difficult to get. What could we do? We could only go and sit and be. But we could hear. And we could allow the person to be heard. And we learned over the years that that was the most powerful thing we could do. It's still true before we're dying. So we don't want to wait. We want to practice this now, whenever we can. But we also learn that it's exhausting to listen in this way. It's really exhausting. Because it's like a muscle that we haven't used enough, and so it tires us out. So we know we can't do it all the time. But as you go through today, I'm hoping you'll be thinking of places and times where you can practice it, in a group or alone with another, just to see how that might be. Now, Ernie and Allison up here are videotaping my talk, but we want to be sure that you know that they're not going to videotape when we're having our conversations. So that will stop. And part of what I like to do, which will be hard for the videotapers, is to have you, if you have anything that's occurred to you so far, put up your hand and I will call on you. And if you don't go too long, we'll keep going to do this. So if you have anything that won't take forever to say or ask or correct, I'm happy to hear it. And I'll repeat whatever you say so that Ernie can hear it. Anything that's occurred to you so far? Yes, Bill.
In your giving of the names,
Yes.
the Holy Spirit.
The Holy Spirit, yes. The Holy Spirit. Yeah. Any other names occur to anybody? Yes, back here. She has a card that she's kept on her desk for years that says, what most people need is a good listening to. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, Elsa.
I have a card also I've had for many, many years. I liked it so much I went home and made business card size things of it, and I've been passing it out. And it says, if God is the center of your life, no words are necessary. Your mere presence will heal hearts.
She has cards that she made into business cards that said, if God is the center of your life, no words are necessary. Your mere presence will heal hearts. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's true. Anyone else? Mm-hmm. When I'm doing this, sometimes I'm reminded, and I think it's from Woody Allen, who says, it's really about showing up, paying attention, telling the truth, and not being attached to the outcome. So in many ways, what we're going to practice here is showing up. You've already started showing up. Pay attention. Pay attention. Tell the truth of what comes when you're asked. And then the part about not being attached to the consequences is the hardest thing in the world for me, because I like to know that there's going to be an outcome, But in this practice, we don't want to we don't even want to think about what the outcome is. First of all, you'll be shocked when it happens anyway, so why worry? I'd also like to tell you a story about how I got hooked on this in the first place. Still Point was doing these retreat days that I told you about, and we invited Rosemary Doherty to come to Santa Barbara, and I think it was probably when she had written this book and she was on a book tour, because we didn't have any problem getting her to come from Washington, D.C. And she did a workshop at the Congregational Church, just like this one all day. And I went with my colleague Georgia Noble from Trinity, and we were sitting in the parish hall of that church in small groups of 4 in the afternoon. And I'd never seen anybody else in the group. I only knew Georgia. And she led us through this practice that I'm going to lead you through this afternoon. And it was really fascinating to me to be given the freedom not to worry about what I was going to have to say, or to try to correct anybody or anything. So I was really relaxed, and so were the others. And so this woman across from me said she would start as the presenter, and she presented this piece. And then there was silence. We all went inside, and we got something that we could say back to her. And the woman sitting next to me, this was enough silence, you see, that you can sort it and think, is this okay to say? Is this okay to say? And she was brave enough to say, well, what came to me, and it was an answer to the question, what is God's prayer in me for you? It's a lovely question. Focuses the question. She said, God's prayer in me for you turned out to be this passage from Isaiah, and she quoted it. And this woman looked absolutely stunned. Her eyes got very big, and she didn't say anything then, but afterwards she said, you don't realize that I'm studying to be a rabbi, and that is the Torah lesson for today. Well, both Georgia and I had chills, and at the end of the day, we said, okay, this works. We've got to do this. And so we started arranging to do group spiritual direction, it was called then, at Trinity. And it went for 9 years. And now it's morphed into circles of trust after Parker Palmer's work. So you see, it begins to have its own life, and we're free to move it on. Now I know that for many of us, we've had experiences like this already. So I want to allow for that this may not be brand new for you. But what it will do is give you a chance to actually have it affirmed, reaffirmed here. And so I want to also talk about what it includes in terms of what we might bring. It includes just about, everything in our life is grist for this mill, let's say. If we believe that God is in everything, in us, in our dailiness, then all the various parts of our lives bring something to this practice. Our work, our play, our relationships, our losses, our griefs, all of it is possible for this. We bring ourselves. And we become vulnerable to God and to each other, which is a perfect place to be when you're thinking about a relationship with God. To make ourselves vulnerable to both the other person and to God in us, to allow something to emerge that's been going on between ourselves and the divine in our dailiness. And anywhere you start, in all the years I've done spiritual direction, many people come and they sit down and they say, I have no idea what I'm bringing today. I'm complete blank. I don't know. I don't have anything to talk about. And I just wait a minute. And then they start. And of course, it's a rich field. But we don't know that until we're heard and until we hear ourselves. We can see. So that's another piece of it. There's nothing outside of this. You can bring anything. And the outcome is that we wake up a little more to ourselves. Becoming true to ourselves is a very difficult journey for many of us. To be actually aware of who we really are inside and to be able to live out of that. So the outcome for these practices can be that it wakes you up. It's kind of a surprise. I'm sure that woman who thought of the passage from Isaiah is still thinking about that. That came out of her. And she didn't plan that. So that revealed something about herself, about her trusting and her vulnerability to God. So this is another wonderful outcome. We also become more conscious, as I certainly did that day, of the Holy Mystery. There are many ways that we could have described that. We could have said, it's magic, It's action at a distance. It's all kinds of things. But actually, in fact, it's the mystery of the holy. That's it's one way to say it. This practice also helps us integrate our work and our prayer. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could pray wherever we were, anywhere, doing anything, to begin to see that that's possible? That every bit of our dailiness can become a connection to God. I used to do workshops in Celtic spirituality, Celtic Christian spirituality. And the reason I loved that work was because it helped us see that in the dailiness of life, in the Celtic tradition, the people prayed in every piece, every bit of daily work was a prayer. The raising of the fire after it had been s'mored at night, the milking of the cow, the weaving, all of it was loaded up with prayer practices. When I worked in the Sojourners community, I was working on the magazine staff at the time, and it was a very stressful job. All of us were very stressed. And so we wanted to have a staff retreat. And this was in the 70s. And so we thought it'd be wonderful. Henry Nouwen had been a contributor to the magazine. So we said, well, maybe we could get Henry to come. He didn't live far away. And he did. And here's what he said he was going to do, which made us roar with laughter. He said, I'm going to teach you all to pray without ceasing. Right. Right you are. Well, he came and actually he did, because here's what he told us. He said, and in his really amazing accent, first he told us that prayer is like breathing. Prayer is like breathing. And so you can't not pray. You're breathing all the time. Okay, so here's how I do it, he says. I just say to God in the morning, here you have Henry. I'm going out to do my work, and I'll just be in conversation. And then he would say, as he's walking along in New York, he said, you know, I would see these beautiful human beings coming, and I would have sexual thoughts, and I would say, oh God, here's what you have in Henry today. And the funniest one for me was that he was at the Vatican when they were going to be choosing a pope. And he's looking up there at all the guys in white. And he's in the congregation, and he's supposed to be praying really hard. And he said, so what am I doing? I'm wondering who does their laundry. And so I say to God, I'm so sorry that this is what you have here. That's where I am. You see, so in that gives you pretty much freedom, doesn't it? Pretty much freedom to pray all the time, anywhere, everywhere. So this is going to be another piece of this, that anything is grist for this. Has that brought up anything for you? Anything? Anything you want to say? Yes.
I just love what you said about him saying how he was thinking about who does the laundry. You know, to stay connected to God and say, here's me, this is what you see, what you get, what you did.
Yeah.
This is one of the individual mindful awareness of.
Yes, she was taken by the funny part about who does the laundry, because that means, you know, that really that's going on all the time in us, isn't it? Our distractions can be a lot of grist for the mill in this way. Mm-hmm. Yes, Elizabeth.
Well, I was hearing that by creating space for listening, we're being peacemakers.
Yes.
There's so much in the world that people feel like people just do.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
We talk about people acting out.
Yes.
And I think it's a little bit. So this work feels like what you.
Elizabeth is saying that this work feels like we're peacemakers because we make space for people to be heard. And that is exactly right, I think. We know, we can probably remember when we've been in a crisis and we've had a person who's able to actually focus, connect to God, and hear us. It's probably not the person who told us all those things that we tend to say before we think about it, like, oh, that's so terrible, well, you know, that happened to me too, or whatever we think of saying. But when we're actually heard, it has such an impact that things move inside us. And we become more peaceful because we know we're not alone, for one thing. We know we're not alone. So this will be an interesting thing to see what you experience. All of our experiences here today will be different because we're so uniquely made. So we won't be holding an outcome in mind for each of you, but it'll be wonderful to see the variety of things that will come for you. Anyone else? So I think it would be a good time for me to tell you about what's in your folder. If you want to take a look. And I'm going to get a folder, which I don't have. Think of that. Thank you, Sarah. We have the outline on the right side. The things on the right side are for today. The other things are applying to today, but they're to take home. More information than you really need for today. So if you take a look at the outline, we're going to take a break in a few minutes, and then when we come back, we're going to do a beginning practice in triads, and then we'll have lunch, and then we'll have little larger groups to form circles to practice spiritual friendship. And then by 2:45 we'll be ready to do evaluations and wrap up. Now there is a green folder that shows you the process, and we don't want people to be reading it while we do it, but this will at least be something that you'll have and you can take home. But I will be the timekeeper and the person who facilitates for you. So, you know, it's a practice of silence. Someone speaks out of their own heart. Silence long enough for the other people in your circle to go deeply inside, and then I will ring the bell to keep track. You don't have to worry about what time it is. And then, whoever feels moved to speak, speaks out of the silence to the presenter what has come. And we'll go through the practice later to give you a better idea of what might be possible without limiting it too much. I always hate to say what's possible because there's a lot more possible than I could tell you. So let's take a break now. Shall we take about a 10-minute break? Would that be enough? And I'll call you back with the bell.